The sun was setting over the film set in Atlanta. Vin Diesel walked slowly toward his trailer after another long day of shooting. His muscles ached from doing stunts all day. The famous actor was tired and ready to rest. He had been working on this movie for weeks now, and every day felt the same. Wake up early, put on makeup, do dangerous scenes, and then go home. As Vin walked past the big equipment trucks, something caught his eye. Behind one of the trucks, a dog was sitting. It was a brown dog, not very big, but not small either. The dog looked thin. Its fur was dirty and messy. Vin could see the dog's ribs through its coat. The animal sat very still, just watching him with dark, sad eyes. Vin loved animals. He had always been kind to dogs and cats. He stopped walking for a moment and looked at the dog. The dog did not move. It just sat there, staring at him with those eyes that seemed to be asking for something. Vin smiled at the dog. He wanted to go closer, but he was very tired. He decided to keep walking to his trailer. The dog watched him walk away. Vin could feel the animal's eyes on his back. When he reached his trailer, he turned around to look one more time. The dog was still sitting in the same spot, still watching him. Something about this moment felt strange to Vin, but he could not explain what it was. Inside his trailer, Vin changed out of his costume and washed his face. He thought about the dog outside. Where did it come from? Did it belong to someone? Was it hungry? These questions filled his mind, but he was too tired to do anything about it right now. He would ask the security team to help the dog tomorrow. When Vin left his trailer to go to his car, he saw the dog again. This time the dog was standing up. As soon as Vin started walking, the dog began to follow him. It stayed far behind, keeping a safe distance. Vin noticed this and stopped. The dog stopped too. When Vin started walking again, the dog followed again. The security guard at the gate saw what was happening. He was a big man named Marcus who had been working on film sets for many years. Marcus tried to shoo the dog away. He waved his arms and made loud noises. The dog backed up a few steps but did not run away. It kept its eyes on Vin the whole time. Vin told Marcus it was okay. He did not want the dog to be scared. He walked to his car and got inside. As he started the engine, he looked in his rearview mirror. The dog was running behind his car. Vin drove slowly at first, thinking the dog would give up and stop. But the dog kept running. Vin drove a bit faster. Surely the dog would stop now, but when he looked in the mirror again, the dog was still there, running as fast as it could. Its tongue was hanging out, and Vin could see it was working very hard to keep up. He felt worried. The dog might get hurt running after a car like this. He drove for 2 blocks. The dog ran for 2 blocks. Vin turned a corner. The dog turned the same corner. This was not normal behavior for a stray dog. Most stray dogs would give up after a few meters. They would get distracted by food or other things. But this dog seemed to have only one goal, and that goal was to follow Vin. Finally, Vin had to drive faster because he had to get on the highway. He watched in his mirror as the dog got smaller and smaller behind him. The animal finally stopped running when it could not keep up anymore. Vin felt bad leaving the dog behind, but what else could he do? He could not take a stray dog home just like that. It might be sick or dangerous. He told himself the dog would be fine and would find food somewhere. But during the drive home, Vin could not stop thinking about the dog. Those sad eyes stayed in his mind. The way the dog had followed him so determinedly was unusual. Most stray dogs were scared of people. They ran away when humans came near. But this dog had chosen to follow him, to trust him somehow. Why? At home that night, Vin had dinner and tried to watch television. But his mind kept going back to the brown dog. He wondered where it was sleeping tonight. Was it cold? Was it hungry? Did it find shelter? These thoughts bothered him more than he expected. He had seen stray dogs before. Everyone had. But something about this particular dog felt different. Vin went to bed but could not sleep well. He had strange dreams about dogs and about being lost. When he woke up in the morning, the first thing he thought about was the brown dog. He told himself he was being silly. It was just a stray dog. There were millions of stray dogs in the world. He could not help all of them. But as Vin drove back to the film set that morning, he found himself looking for the dog. He drove slowly past the place where he had last seen it. The dog was not there. He felt disappointed, which surprised him. Why did he care so much about this one dog? Vin arrived at the film set early. He parked his car and walked toward the makeup trailer. The security guard from yesterday, Marcus, was already at his post. Marcus waved at Vin and then pointed toward the entrance gate. Vin looked where Marcus was pointing. The brown dog was there. It was sitting right next to the gate in almost the same position as yesterday. When the dog saw Vin, its ears moved forward. Its tail wagged just a little bit. The dog stood up but did not come closer. It just waited and watched. Marcus walked over to Vin. He looked concerned. The security guard told Vin that the dog had been there since very early in the morning. Marcus had arrived at 5 in the morning, and the dog was already waiting. It had been sitting there for hours just watching the gate. Marcus had tried to give it some food from his lunch, but the dog would not eat. It just kept watching the gate, as if it was waiting for someone specific. Vin felt a chill run through his body. The dog had waited for him. All night, or at least since early morning, this animal had been waiting at the gate for him to arrive. This was not normal behavior. Something strange was happening here. Dogs did not act this way without a reason. He walked slowly toward the dog. The animal watched him come closer but did not run away. When Vin got within a few meters, he stopped and crouched down. He wanted to seem less threatening. The dog tilted its head to one side, studying him carefully. Vin could see now that the dog had kind eyes despite looking so sad and tired. Vin spoke softly to the dog. He told it that everything was okay. He said he would not hurt it. The dog's tail wagged a little more, but it still did not come closer. It seemed to be waiting for something, expecting something from Vin. But what? What did this dog want? And more importantly, why had it chosen him? These questions filled Vin's mind as he stood up and walked to his trailer, the brown dog watching his every move. Throughout the entire day, Vin could not focus properly on his work. Between every scene, during every break, he found himself looking for the brown dog. And every single time he looked, the dog was there. Sometimes it sat near the equipment trucks. Sometimes it lay down in the shade of a building. But the dog was always watching him. Its eyes never left Vin for long. The other people on the film set started to notice the dog too. The makeup artist asked Vin if the dog was his. Vin said no. The director asked if someone should call animal control to take the dog away. Vin quickly said no to that too. He did not want the dog to be taken to a shelter. Something inside him said that would be wrong. During lunch break, Vin sat in his chair and ate a sandwich. The dog sat about 20 meters away, just watching. Vin tore off a piece of his sandwich and threw it toward the dog. The food landed a few meters away from the animal. The dog looked at the food, then looked back at Vin. It did not move toward the sandwich. It was not interested in the food. This confused Vin even more. Every stray dog he had ever seen was hungry and would jump at any chance for food. One of the stunt coordinators, a woman named Lisa, came over to talk to Vin. She had been watching the situation all morning. Lisa told Vin that she used to work at an animal shelter. She said the dog's behavior was very unusual. Normal stray dogs either ran away from people or came close to beg for food. This dog was doing neither. It was maintaining a constant distance, like it was guarding someone or waiting for a specific moment. Lisa suggested that the dog might have been trained as a service dog or a working dog. Such dogs often behaved differently from regular pets. They had jobs to do and took those jobs seriously. But what job could this dog possibly have that involved following Vin? He had never seen this dog before 2 days ago. Vin decided to try something. When filming ended for the day, instead of going to his car, he started walking. He told his driver to go home without him. Vin wanted to see what the dog would do. He walked out of the film set gate and onto the sidewalk. He did not look back, but he could hear the soft sound of paws on concrete behind him. Vin walked for 1 block. The dog followed. He walked for 2 blocks. The dog was still there. He walked for 10 blocks. The footsteps behind him never stopped. Vin walked through a park, past shops, around corners, and through a quiet neighborhood. The dog followed every step of the way, always staying the same distance behind. After walking for about 40 minutes, Vin reached a small coffee shop. He was genuinely thirsty now and needed to rest. He went inside and ordered a cold drink. Through the window, he could see the dog sitting outside on the sidewalk. It was panting heavily from the long walk. Its tongue hung out and it looked tired. But even though the dog was clearly exhausted, it kept watching the door of the coffee shop. Vin felt his heart break a little. This dog was pushing itself so hard just to follow him. Why? He asked the person at the coffee shop for a bowl of water. The worker gave him a large bowl filled with cold water. Vin took it outside and placed it in front of the dog. The dog looked at the water. It was clearly very thirsty. Its whole body seemed to shake with tiredness. But the dog looked up at Vin first, as if asking for permission. Vin nodded and said it was okay. Only then did the dog begin to drink. It drank almost the entire bowl of water. When it finished, it sat back down and looked up at Vin with those same sad, desperate eyes. Vin crouched down again, just like he had done that morning. He was now close enough to touch the dog. Slowly, very slowly, he reached out his hand. The dog watched his hand come closer. Vin expected the dog to back away or maybe even growl, but instead the dog leaned forward. It pressed its nose gently against Vin's palm. That simple touch felt like electricity. Vin felt a connection to this animal that he could not explain. The dog's nose was warm and wet against his skin. The animal was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from something else. It seemed like the dog was trying to communicate something urgent, something important. But what? Vin sat down on the sidewalk, not caring that he was a famous actor sitting on a dirty street. The dog moved a little closer. It was still cautious, still keeping some distance, but closer than before. Vin could now see the dog better in the late afternoon light. The dog had scars on its body. Some looked old, some looked newer. Its paws were cut and bleeding slightly. This dog had been through something difficult recently. He looked into the dog's eyes and saw something that shocked him. He saw intelligence there. He saw purpose. This was not just a random stray looking for food or shelter. This dog was on a mission. It had a goal, and somehow Vin was part of that goal. Vin spent nearly 20 minutes sitting on that sidewalk with the dog. People walked past and stared at him. Some recognized him and looked surprised to see a movie star sitting on the ground with a stray dog. But Vin did not care. He was trying to understand what was happening. Finally, Vin stood up. His legs were stiff from sitting. He pulled out his phone and called his assistant, Maria. He told her he needed help. He needed someone who knew about dogs. Maria said she would find a veterinarian who could come to the film set tomorrow. Vin thanked her and hung up. Now came the hard part. Vin had to decide what to do with the dog tonight. He could not just leave it on the street, especially now that he had seen its cut paws and tired body. But he also could not take it home without knowing if it was safe or sick. He made a decision. Vin called Marcus, the security guard. He asked if the dog could stay at the film set overnight. Marcus said the property was fenced and secure. The dog would be safe there. Vin said he would pay for dog food and a blanket. Marcus agreed to help. Vin started walking back toward the film set. The walk that had taken 40 minutes before now took over an hour, because Vin walked very slowly. He did not want the dog to tire itself out more. Several times he stopped to let the dog rest. Each time he stopped, the dog sat down immediately, panting hard. But as soon as Vin started walking again, the dog got up and followed. When they finally reached the film set, it was dark. Marcus was waiting at the gate with a bag of dog food and an old blanket. Marcus had set up a comfortable spot under a covered area, where the dog could sleep and be protected from the weather. There was food and a large bowl of fresh water. Vin led the dog to this spot. The dog sniffed at everything but still did not eat. Vin sat down next to the blanket and patted it, showing the dog it was okay to rest here. The dog looked at the blanket, then at Vin, then back at the blanket. Slowly, the dog stepped onto the blanket and lay down, but its eyes never left Vin. Vin stayed there for another 30 minutes, just sitting with the dog. He talked to it softly, telling it stories about his own dogs at home. He told the dog that tomorrow they would figure out what was going on. He promised the dog he would help it find what it was looking for. When Vin finally stood up to leave, the dog tried to stand up too. Vin gently told it to stay. He said he would come back tomorrow. The dog whined softly, a sad sound that made Vin's chest hurt. But the dog was too tired to follow anymore. It lay back down on the blanket, its eyes following Vin as he walked to his car. That night, Vin could not stop thinking about the dog. He researched online about why dogs follow strangers. He read about service dogs and therapy dogs. He looked at articles about dog behavior and what makes dogs attached to certain people. But nothing he read explained what was happening with this particular dog. At 2 a.m, Vin was still awake. He felt worried about the dog. Was it okay? Was it scared being alone at the film set? He almost drove back to check on it, but told himself that was crazy. The dog was fine. Marcus had made sure it was safe and comfortable. But Vin could not shake the feeling that something important was happening. This dog had chosen him for a reason. It had followed him for miles, exhausting itself, hurting its paws, refusing food. Dogs did not do that without a very good reason. Tomorrow the veterinarian would come. Maybe then they would get some answers. Maybe then Vin would understand why this brown dog had walked into his life and refused to leave. Vin arrived at the film set very early the next morning. The sun was just starting to come up. He had barely slept thinking about the dog all night. As soon as he parked his car, he rushed to the spot where Marcus had set up the blanket for the dog. The dog was awake. It was sitting on the blanket, waiting. When it saw Vin, its tail began to wag. The food bowl was still full. The dog had not eaten anything all night, but the water bowl was empty. At least the dog had been drinking. Vin sat down next to the dog. In the early morning light, he could see the animal looked even more tired than before. The dog's eyes had dark circles around them. Its breathing seemed heavy. This dog was exhausted, maybe even sick. Vin felt guilty. He should have taken the dog to a vet yesterday, not waited until today. Marcus came over with fresh water. He told Vin the dog had been very quiet all night. It had not barked or made any noise. It had just laid on the blanket, watching the gate. Marcus said it seemed like the dog was waiting for Vin to come back. This made Vin feel even worse. Around 9 in the morning, a car pulled up to the gate. A woman got out carrying a black medical bag. This was Dr. Sarah Chen, the veterinarian that Maria had found. Dr. Chen was a small woman with short black hair and kind eyes. She had worked with animals for over 15 years. Maria had told her about the strange situation with the dog, and Dr. Chen was very interested to help. Vin walked over to greet her. He explained everything that had happened over the past 2 days. Dr. Chen listened carefully, asking questions about the dog's behavior. She seemed particularly interested when Vin told her the dog would not eat and had followed him for miles. Together they walked over to where the dog was sitting. The dog watched Dr. Chen approach but did not seem afraid. Dr. Chen moved slowly and spoke in a soft, calm voice. She told Vin that the dog seemed gentle and not aggressive. This was a good sign. Dr. Chen knelt down and let the dog sniff her hand. The dog sniffed her carefully, then looked back at Vin. It was as if the dog was checking if this person was okay, if Vin trusted her. Vin nodded at the dog and said it was okay. The dog relaxed a little. Dr. Chen began her examination. She checked the dog's ears, eyes, and teeth. She listened to its heart and lungs with a stethoscope. She felt the dog's stomach and legs. The dog sat very still during all of this, like it was used to being examined. This told Dr. Chen something important. This dog had seen a vet before. This was not a dog that had lived on the streets its whole life. Then Dr. Chen checked the dog's paws. She gently lifted each paw and looked at the cuts. She made a sad noise when she saw how bad they were. The cuts were deep in some places. The pads of the dog's feet were worn down. Dr. Chen told Vin that these injuries were from walking or running on hard surfaces for a very long time. This dog had traveled a long distance, probably many miles. Dr. Chen cleaned the cuts and put medicine on them. The dog whined softly when the medicine stung, but it did not pull away. It let Dr. Chen work, even though it must have hurt. Vin held the dog's head gently, telling it everything would be okay. After treating the paws, Dr. Chen pulled out a small device from her bag. She told Vin this was a microchip scanner. Many pet owners put tiny microchips under their dog's skin. These chips had information about the owner and where the dog lived. Dr. Chen said she always checked for chips when she found a stray dog. She turned on the scanner and moved it slowly over the dog's body. At first, nothing happened. But when she moved the scanner over the dog's shoulder area, the device beeped. Dr. Chen's eyes went wide. She looked at Vin with surprise. The dog had a microchip. Vin felt his heart beat faster. This changed everything. The dog belonged to someone. It had an owner. Maybe the owner was looking for it right now. Dr. Chen wrote down the number that appeared on the scanner. She pulled out her phone and called a national pet registry database. She gave them the chip number and waited. The minutes felt very long. Vin sat with the dog, petting its head while they waited for information. The dog leaned against Vin's leg. It seemed more relaxed now, like it knew something important was about to happen. Finally, Dr. Chen got the information. She listened to the person on the phone, writing things down in a small notebook. When she hung up, her face looked troubled. She sat down next to Vin and showed him what she had written. The dog's name was Ranger. That was the first thing Vin learned. The dog he had been calling the brown dog had a real name. Ranger. It was a good name, strong and loyal sounding. The chip was registered to an address about 15 miles away from the film set. It belonged to a man named James Morrison. The phone number on file was no longer working. The registration was 3 years old. There had been no updates since then. Vin asked Dr. Chen what this meant. She said it could mean many things. Maybe the owner had moved and forgot to update the information. Maybe the owner had changed phone numbers. Or maybe something had happened to the owner. The only way to know for sure was to go to the address and check. But Dr. Chen noticed something else that worried her. She pointed to Ranger's body condition. Besides the cut paws, Ranger showed signs of not eating for many days. He was dehydrated even though Marcus had given him water. His coat was dirty and matted. Most importantly, Ranger showed signs of severe stress and exhaustion. Dr. Chen said these were not just signs of a lost pet. These were signs of a dog that had been traveling with desperate purpose for a long time. She explained to Vin that dogs could be very loyal to their owners. When something bad happened to an owner, some dogs would search for them. Some dogs would travel incredible distances trying to find their person. The fact that Ranger had walked 15 miles with injured paws, refusing to eat, following Vin specifically, suggested something serious had happened. Vin felt cold fear in his stomach. What if Ranger's owner was hurt somewhere? What if the owner needed help and Ranger had been trying to lead someone to them? But that did not make sense. Why would Ranger follow Vin? Vin had never met anyone named James Morrison. He had no connection to this dog or its owner. Dr. Chen suggested they go to the address right away. She said Ranger needed proper medical care soon, including stitches for some of the deeper cuts on his paws. But first they should try to find his owner. If James Morrison was home, he could take Ranger to his own vet. If he was not home, then they needed to figure out what was going on. Vin agreed immediately. He told his assistant Maria to tell the director he would be late today. He had an emergency to handle. Maria understood and said she would take care of everything. Vin gently picked up Ranger. The dog was heavier than he expected, probably weighing about 60 pounds. But Ranger did not struggle. He let Vin carry him to the car. Dr. Chen followed with her medical bag. They put Ranger in the back seat. Vin sat next to him while Dr. Chen drove. She had the address written down. As they drove through the city, Vin watched Ranger. The dog was looking out the window, his eyes moving back and forth as they passed buildings and streets. Was Ranger recognizing these places? Did he know they were going toward his home? After about 30 minutes of driving, they reached a quieter part of the city. The houses here were older and smaller. Some yards were neat and tidy, others were overgrown. Dr. Chen drove slowly, checking the house numbers. Finally, she stopped in front of a small white house. The address matched the one from the chip registry. Vin looked at the house and his stomach dropped. Something was very wrong here. The grass in the front yard was very long and wild. It had not been cut in weeks, maybe months. The mailbox was overflowing with letters and papers. Several newspapers lay in the driveway, still in their plastic bags, yellow from sun and rain. The curtains in the windows were closed. The house looked empty and abandoned. Vin got out of the car carrying Ranger. As soon as the dog saw the house, something changed. Ranger began to shake in Vin's arms. The dog made a high, painful whining sound. It was a sound of pure sadness. Vin had never heard a dog make such a heartbreaking noise. Dr. Chen came around the car and saw Ranger's reaction. She looked at Vin with serious eyes. She said that Ranger recognized this house. This was definitely his home. But something bad had happened here. Ranger's reaction told them that much. Vin carried Ranger up to the front door. He tried to stay calm for the dog's sake, but his hands were shaking. He knocked on the door. No one answered. He knocked again, louder. Still nothing. He tried the doorbell. He could hear it ring inside the house, but no one came to the door. He looked through the front window, but the curtains were too thick to see through. Vin did not know what to do. He could not just break into the house. But they needed answers. Where was James Morrison? Why was his house abandoned? And why had Ranger traveled 15 miles to find Vin? Just then, a voice called out from the next house. An older woman was standing on her porch watching them. She looked concerned and curious. She asked if they were looking for James. Her voice had a sad tone that made Vin's heart sink even more. The older woman walked across her yard toward them. She moved slowly, using a cane to help her walk. She was probably in her 70s with white hair and glasses. She wore a flower print dress and a sad expression on her face. As she got closer, she looked at Ranger in Vin's arms and her eyes filled with tears. She introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson. She said she had lived next door to James for almost 10 years. When she saw Ranger, she put her hand over her mouth. She said she had been wondering what happened to that poor dog. She had not seen Ranger since the day the ambulance came. Vin felt his stomach twist. Ambulance? He asked Mrs. Patterson what she meant. The old woman invited them to sit on her porch. She said it was a long story and they should be comfortable. Vin and Dr. Chen followed her, with Ranger still in Vin's arms. The dog was shaking less now but still seemed very upset. Mrs. Patterson sat in her rocking chair on the porch. She took a deep breath and began to tell them about James Morrison. She said James was a veteran. He had served in the military many years ago, in a war overseas. When James came back from the war, he was different. Mrs. Patterson said James suffered from something called PTSD. This meant he had bad memories from the war that still bothered him every day. James rarely left his house. He had trouble being around lots of people. Loud noises scared him. Sometimes he had nightmares. Mrs. Patterson said it was very sad to watch. James was only 45 years old, but he lived like an old man, afraid and alone. The only friend James had was Ranger. Mrs. Patterson said James got Ranger about 5 years ago from a special program that gave dogs to veterans. Ranger was trained to help people with PTSD. The dog could sense when James was getting upset or scared. Ranger would stay close to James and calm him down. The two of them were never apart. Mrs. Patterson saw them together every day. James would sit on his porch with Ranger lying next to him. Sometimes they would walk around the neighborhood together, always late at night when fewer people were around. She said she had never seen a man and a dog so close. They needed each other. Then Mrs. Patterson's voice broke. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. She told them what happened 3 weeks ago. It was a normal morning. Mrs. Patterson was watering her flowers when she heard Ranger barking loudly from inside James's house. Ranger never barked like that. Something was wrong. Mrs. Patterson went to James's door and knocked. No one answered, but she could hear Ranger barking desperately inside. She tried the door and found it unlocked. When she went inside, she found James on the floor. He was not moving. He was breathing, but he looked very sick. His skin was gray and he was sweating. Mrs. Patterson immediately called for an ambulance. She said those were the longest minutes of her life, waiting for help to arrive while Ranger barked and whined next to James. The dog was trying to wake his owner up, licking James's face and pawing at him. Ranger knew something terrible was happening. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics worked on James right there on the floor. They said he was having a heart attack. They needed to get him to the hospital immediately. Everything happened so fast. The paramedics put James on a stretcher and carried him out to the ambulance. In all the chaos and hurry, no one noticed that the front door was left wide open. Mrs. Patterson was busy answering questions from the paramedics. She was telling them about James's medical history and his medications. By the time she looked around for Ranger, the dog was gone. He had run out the open door. Mrs. Patterson called for Ranger, but the dog did not come back. She looked around the neighborhood for hours, but she could not find him. She thought maybe Ranger would come home on his own when he got hungry. But he never did. Mrs. Patterson called animal control to report a missing dog. She put up signs around the neighborhood with Ranger's picture. She checked the local animal shelters every day. But there was no sign of Ranger anywhere. It was like the dog had vanished. Then Mrs. Patterson's voice got even quieter. She told them that James died 2 days after the heart attack. He never woke up in the hospital. The doctors said the heart attack was very bad. James had not been taking good care of himself. He had not been eating right or taking his medicine properly. His heart just gave out. Vin felt tears in his own eyes now. He looked down at Ranger in his arms. This poor dog had lost his owner, his best friend, the person he was trained to protect and help. No wonder Ranger had been so desperate and sad. Mrs. Patterson continued her story. She said James had no family. His parents had died years ago. He had a brother, but they had not spoken in many years because of an argument. The county tried to find the brother to tell him about James's death, but they could not locate him. James was buried in a veteran cemetery with a simple funeral. Only a few neighbors came, including Mrs. Patterson. She said the house had been locked up since then. James had rented the house, and the landlord was waiting to see if any family member would claim James's things. So far, no one had come. The house just sat there empty and sad, just like James's life had been. Dr. Chen asked Mrs. Patterson if she knew where Ranger might have gone after he ran away. Mrs. Patterson shook her head. She said she had no idea. She thought maybe the dog had gotten scared and lost in the chaos. She never imagined Ranger would travel so far away. But that brought them to the big question. Why had Ranger traveled 15 miles to find Vin? Vin had never met James Morrison. He had no connection to this man or his dog. What was the link? Vin asked Mrs. Patterson if James had ever mentioned him or movies or anything like that. Mrs. Patterson thought for a moment. Then her face changed. She said yes, actually. James loved movies. They were one of the few things that made him happy. She remembered James talking about action movies especially. She asked them to wait a moment. Mrs. Patterson went inside her house.
She came back a few minutes later holding a tablet computer.
She said James had given her his Facebook password months ago in case of emergency. She had used it to try to find his brother after James died. She opened Facebook and logged into James's account. She scrolled through James's posts. There were not many. James rarely posted anything. But then Mrs. Patterson stopped on one post from about 4 months ago. She turned the tablet so Vin and Dr. Chen could see. The post had a photo. In the photo, James and Ranger were sitting on a couch together. On the TV in front of them, a movie was playing. Vin recognized the movie immediately. It was one of his Fast and Furious films. In the photo, James was smiling, really smiling. One arm was around Ranger, and they both looked happy and peaceful. Vin read the caption that James had written with the photo. James wrote about how he and Ranger had a tradition. Every week they would watch a movie together. James said these movies helped him feel better. They helped him escape from his bad thoughts for a little while. He wrote that Ranger seemed to love the movies too, especially the Fast and Furious films. He said something about how Vin Diesel's character talked about family and loyalty, and how much those ideas meant to him. James wrote that he was grateful for these movies. He said they gave him hope. He said watching them with Ranger was the best part of his week. The post ended with James thanking the actors and filmmakers for making something that helped veterans like him cope with their pain. Vin could barely see the screen anymore because his eyes were full of tears. This man, James Morrison, had found comfort in his movies. And now James was gone, but his dog had somehow found Vin. Was it possible? Could Ranger have been looking for the person his owner loved watching on screen? Mrs. Patterson scrolled down to show them more posts. There were a few others mentioning movies. One post talked about how James's counselor at the VA hospital had suggested watching action movies as a form of therapy. The counselor said the themes of never giving up and protecting your family might help James feel less alone. It had worked. James wrote that the movies, combined with Ranger's company, were keeping him going. Another post from 2 months ago mentioned that James had taken Ranger to a movie theater to see the newest Fast and Furious film. James wrote about how nervous he had been to go to a crowded theater, but Ranger had stayed calm beside him and helped him through it. James said it was the first time he had left his house for something fun in years. He felt proud of himself and grateful to Ranger. Dr. Chen spoke up then.
She said she had read about cases like this before.
Dogs who were trained as service animals formed incredibly strong bonds with their owners. When the owner died suddenly, some dogs would search for anything connected to that owner. They would search for familiar smells, familiar places, familiar people. She suggested that Ranger might have picked up Vin's scent from somewhere in the area. The film production had been doing work all over Atlanta for weeks. There had been promotional events, location shoots, equipment trucks moving through different neighborhoods. It was possible that Ranger had caught Vin's scent from one of these activities. The dog was trained to be alert and observant. Once Ranger recognized the scent of someone his owner had loved and watched for comfort, the dog might have decided to find that person. Vin thought about this. It seemed impossible, like something from a movie, but he was holding the proof in his arms. Ranger had walked 15 miles on injured paws, refusing to eat or give up until he found Vin. The dog had not been looking for just anyone to help him. He had been looking specifically for Vin, the person his owner had watched and loved. Vin sat on Mrs. Patterson's porch holding Ranger for a long time. No one spoke. They were all thinking about what this meant. A man had died alone, finding his only comfort in movies and his service dog. And now that dog had traveled across the city to find the actor from those movies, as if somehow that might bring his owner back. Mrs. Patterson offered to show them more. She asked if they wanted to see inside James's house. She still had the key that James had given her years ago for emergencies. Vin was not sure he wanted to go inside. It felt wrong, like invading a dead man's privacy. But he also felt like he owed it to James and to Ranger to understand their life together. They walked across the yard to James's front door. Mrs. Patterson's hands shook as she put the key in the lock. The door opened with a creak. Inside, the house was dark because all the curtains were closed. Mrs. Patterson turned on the lights. The house was small and simple. There was a living room with an old couch and a TV. There was a small kitchen with dishes still in the sink from the morning James had his heart attack. Everything was frozen in time, like James had just stepped out and would be back any moment. But what caught Vin's attention was the living room. On the wall were several movie posters. Most of them were from the Fast and Furious series. They were not expensive fancy posters, just regular ones that anyone could buy. But they were framed carefully and hung with pride. This was clearly important to James. On a shelf next to the TV were DVD cases. Vin walked over and looked at them. Almost all of them were action movies. Many were his films. The DVD cases were worn, like they had been played many times. Next to the DVDs was a photo. It showed a younger James in a military uniform, smiling and looking healthy. He looked so different from the man Mrs. Patterson had described. The war had changed him so much. Ranger began to struggle in Vin's arms. The dog wanted to get down. Vin carefully set him on the floor. Despite his injured paws, Ranger immediately limped over to the couch. He jumped up whining softly. This was clearly his spot, the place where he had sat with James to watch movies together. Ranger circled the couch cushion several times, sniffing everything. He was looking for James's scent. When he did not find his owner, Ranger lay down and put his head on the cushion where James must have sat. The dog closed his eyes and made a sound that was almost like crying. It was the saddest thing Vin had ever seen. Dr. Chen wiped her eyes. Even she was crying now. Mrs. Patterson had to sit down in James's chair because her legs were shaking. They all understood what they were seeing. This dog was mourning. He missed his owner desperately. He had been living with this grief for 3 weeks, searching and hoping and refusing to give up. Vin sat on the couch next to Ranger. He put his hand on the dog's back. Ranger opened his eyes and looked at Vin. In those eyes, Vin saw hope mixed with sadness. He saw a question: can you bring him back? Can you help me find him? Vin's heart broke. He wanted to explain to Ranger that James was gone. He wanted to make the dog understand that James had not abandoned him. James had not wanted to leave. But how could you explain death to a dog? How could you make an animal understand that the person they loved was never coming back? Mrs. Patterson suggested they look at James's computer. She said James kept a journal on it, writing about his feelings and his progress with therapy. Maybe there was more information there that would help them understand. She turned on the old laptop that sat on a desk in the corner. The computer was slow to start. When it finally opened, Mrs. Patterson clicked on a document folder. Inside were dozens of journal entries. She opened the most recent ones and began to read them out loud. James's writing was honest and painful. He wrote about his struggles with PTSD. He wrote about the nightmares that woke him up at night. He wrote about feeling alone and scared. But he also wrote about the things that helped him. And 2 things came up over and over: Ranger and movies. In one entry from 3 months ago, James wrote about having a really bad week. He had barely left his bed. He had not eaten properly. He felt like giving up. But then he wrote about how Ranger had not left his side all week. The dog had stayed with him, brought him his medicine bottle, pushed his food bowl toward him. And when James finally got out of bed, Ranger had led him to the couch and sat there until James turned on a movie. James wrote that watching those movies reminded him that family was not just about blood relatives. Family was about the people and animals who stayed with you through hard times. He wrote that Vin Diesel's character in the movies always talked about family and loyalty. James said those ideas gave him a reason to keep going. If he gave up, who would take care of Ranger? Who would be Ranger's family? In another entry from just 2 weeks before his death, James wrote about feeling sick. He said his chest hurt sometimes and he got tired easily. But he did not want to go to the doctor. He was afraid they would put him in the hospital. He was afraid of being away from Ranger. He wrote that he knew he should get checked, but he kept putting it off. He promised himself he would go next week, but next week never came. James had his heart attack before he could get help. Vin felt angry reading this. If James had just gone to the doctor, maybe he would still be alive. Maybe he and Ranger would still be watching movies together on that couch. But Vin also understood fear. He understood how mental illness could make you put off important things. James had been struggling just to get through each day. Going to the doctor probably felt impossible to him. Mrs. Patterson closed the laptop. She said that was enough. They had seen what they needed to see. James had loved Ranger. James had found hope in movies. And now Ranger had found Vin, the person who represented that hope. Vin knew what he had to do. He looked at Dr. Chen and asked if Ranger was healthy enough to be adopted. Dr. Chen said yes. Ranger needed treatment for his paws and he needed to eat and rest. But otherwise he was a healthy dog. He was only about 6 years old. He could live many more years with the right care. Vin took a deep breath and said he wanted to adopt Ranger. He would give this dog a home. He would take care of James's best friend. It was the least he could do for a veteran who had found comfort in his movies. Dr. Chen smiled. She said that was wonderful. But she warned Vin that Ranger might have trouble adjusting. The dog had lost his owner and his home. Ranger might be sad for a long time. He might have behavioral problems. Service dogs were trained to work, and without James, Ranger might feel lost and without purpose. Vin said he understood. He promised to be patient with Ranger. He promised to get the dog whatever help he needed. He would hire trainers if necessary. He would take Ranger to therapy if dogs could have therapy. He would do whatever it took. But Vin felt like this was about more than just helping a dog. This was about honoring James Morrison's memory. James had been a veteran who served his country and came home broken. He had struggled alone with his pain, finding comfort in small things like movies and his dog. The least society could do, the least Vin could do, was take care of the companion James had left behind. Mrs. Patterson started crying again, but this time from happiness. She said James would be so grateful to know Ranger found a good home. She said James had worried about what would happen to Ranger if something happened to him. James had tried to make plans, but he did not have any friends or family to leave Ranger with. He had planned to put it in his will that Ranger should go to a service dog organization, but he had never gotten around to writing the will. Vin asked Mrs. Patterson if there was anything from the house that Ranger should have. Something that smelled like James or that had memories attached to it. Mrs. Patterson thought about it. She went to James's bedroom and came back with an old military jacket. She said James used to wear this jacket all the time. Ranger loved to sleep on it. The jacket would still have James's scent. She also grabbed one of the DVD cases from the shelf. It was a Fast and Furious movie, the one that James watched most often. She said Vin should have this. It was a connection between James and Vin, even though they never met in person. Vin took both items carefully. He held the jacket up to Ranger's nose. The dog immediately perked up. He sniffed the jacket intensely, his tail wagging just a little. Ranger recognized James's smell. It seemed to comfort him. Dr. Chen said they should go. Ranger needed medical attention for his paws, and Vin probably needed time to process everything that happened. Mrs. Patterson walked them to the door. Before they left, she hugged Vin. She thanked him for being kind to Ranger. She thanked him for making movies that helped James through his darkest days. She said not all heroes wore capes or fought villains. Sometimes heroes were just people who told stories that gave others hope. Vin did not feel like a hero. He felt humble and small. He had just been doing his job, making movies. He never knew those movies meant so much to someone. He never knew his work had helped a suffering veteran feel less alone. It made him think about his responsibility as an actor differently. They carried Ranger back to the car. This time Vin wrapped him in James's jacket. The dog seemed calmer now, more settled. Maybe having something that smelled like James helped Ranger feel less anxious. As Dr. Chen drove away from the house, Vin looked back. Mrs. Patterson was standing on James's porch, waving goodbye. The house looked sad and empty behind her. Vin made a mental note to ask Maria to help Mrs. Patterson with anything she needed from James's estate. Maybe some of James's things could be donated to help other veterans. Dr. Chen drove them to her veterinary clinic. It was a clean, bright place with friendly staff members. They took Ranger to an examination room and began proper treatment. They cleaned his paws again, more thoroughly this time. They put stitches in the deepest cuts. They gave him medicine for pain and to prevent infection. They gave him shots to make sure he was protected against diseases. Through all of this, Ranger stayed calm. He was used to medical procedures from his training as a service dog. But he kept his eyes on Vin the whole time. Whenever Vin moved, Ranger's head turned to follow him. The dog seemed afraid that Vin might disappear like James had. Vin stayed close. He talked to Ranger constantly, reassuring him that everything was okay. He promised Ranger he was not going anywhere. He promised they would go home together. He was not sure if the dog understood his words, but his tone seemed to comfort Ranger. After the medical treatment was done, Dr. Chen's staff brought food. They offered Ranger a bowl of high-quality dog food, mixed with some wet food to make it more appealing. Ranger sniffed at it but did not eat. This worried everyone. The dog had not eaten in days. He needed food to heal and regain his strength. Vin had an idea. He sat down on the floor next to the food bowl. He took a small piece of the food in his hand and offered it to Ranger. He spoke softly, encouraging the dog to eat. Ranger looked at the food, then at Vin, then back at the food. Finally, slowly, Ranger took the piece of food from Vin's hand and ate it. Vin smiled. He offered another piece. Ranger ate that one too. Piece by piece, Vin hand-fed Ranger until the dog had eaten about half the bowl. It was not a full meal, but it was a start. Dr. Chen said that was good progress. Ranger was beginning to trust again. Dr. Chen gave Vin instructions for taking care of Ranger. The dog needed to take medicine twice a day. His paws needed to be cleaned and bandaged daily for at least a week. He needed to eat small meals several times a day until his stomach adjusted. Most importantly, Ranger needed patience and understanding as he adjusted to his new life. She also gave Vin the name of an animal behaviorist who specialized in helping traumatized dogs. Dr. Chen strongly suggested that Vin make an appointment. Ranger had experienced severe loss and stress. He might develop separation anxiety or other behavioral problems. Professional help could make the transition easier for both of them. Vin thanked Dr. Chen for everything. He paid for all the treatment and left a large donation to her clinic. He wanted to help her continue doing good work for other animals. Dr. Chen was touched. She gave Vin her personal cell phone number and said he could call any time if he had questions or concerns about Ranger. When they got to Vin's car, he realized he had a problem. He had driven his sports car to the film set that morning. It only had 2 seats and it was not really suitable for a dog. Vin called his assistant Maria. He asked her to bring his SUV to the clinic and take his sports car back. Maria said she would be there in 30 minutes. While they waited, Vin sat on a bench outside the clinic with Ranger. The afternoon sun was warm. Other people came and went with their pets. Some recognized Vin and looked surprised to see him at a vet clinic, but Vin did not care about being recognized right now. His focus was entirely on Ranger. Ranger lay down next to Vin's feet, his head resting on James's jacket. The dog looked exhausted. The pain medicine was making him sleepy. His eyes were starting to close. Before he fell asleep, Ranger looked up at Vin one more time. This time, the look in his eyes was different. It was not desperate anymore. It was grateful. It was the beginning of trust. Vin felt emotion rising in his chest. He had not planned on getting a dog. He already had pets at home. His life was busy with filming and travel. But looking at Ranger, he knew this was meant to happen. This dog had walked 15 miles to find him. This dog had chosen him. How could he say no to that? When Maria arrived with the SUV, she immediately fell in love with Ranger. She knelt down and petted him gently, careful not to touch his bandaged paws. She told Vin she would help with anything he needed. She would research the best dog food, the best toys, everything. She would make sure Vin's house was ready for Ranger. They carefully lifted Ranger into the back of the SUV. Vin sat back there with him, wanting to keep the dog calm during the drive. Maria drove them to Vin's home. During the ride, Vin made several phone calls. He called the animal behaviorist and made an appointment for the next day. He called a pet store and asked them to deliver supplies to his house. He called his housekeeper and asked her to set up a comfortable space for Ranger. When they arrived at Vin's house, it was evening. The house was large and beautiful, so different from James's small rental home. Vin worried that Ranger might be overwhelmed. But when they brought Ranger inside, the dog just seemed tired. He limped around, sniffing things, getting familiar with his new environment. Then he found a spot near the couch in the living room and lay down. Vin's other dogs came to investigate. He had 2 dogs already, both rescues that he had adopted years ago. At first they were curious and a bit territorial about this new dog in their home, but they quickly sensed that Ranger was not a threat. Ranger was too tired and sad to play or challenge them. After sniffing him thoroughly, Vin's other dogs left Ranger alone to rest. That first night was difficult. Ranger would not sleep. He followed Vin everywhere. When Vin went to the kitchen, Ranger followed. When Vin went upstairs, Ranger struggled up the stairs on his hurt paws to follow. When Vin went to his bedroom, Ranger stood outside the door and whined. Vin understood. Ranger was terrified of losing another owner. The dog could not relax unless he could see Vin, so Vin made a decision. He brought blankets and pillows downstairs and made a bed on the living room couch. He invited Ranger to join him. The dog immediately jumped up, careful with his bandaged paws, and curled up next to Vin. Finally, with Vin right there beside him, Ranger fell asleep. Vin stayed awake for a while watching the dog sleep. Ranger's feet twitched and he made small noises. He was dreaming. Vin hoped they were good dreams, not nightmares about losing James. Vin slept on that couch for the next week. Every night, Ranger needed to sleep next to him. Slowly, gradually, the dog began to relax. He started eating better. He let Vin's housekeeper pet him. He began to play a little with Vin's other dogs. The sadness in his eyes started to fade just a little. The animal behaviorist helped a lot. She taught Vin techniques for helping Ranger feel secure. She explained that service dogs needed jobs to feel purposeful. She suggested giving Ranger small tasks like bringing Vin his shoes or alerting him when someone was at the door. These small responsibilities helped Ranger feel needed again. But what helped most was time and love. Vin spent hours with Ranger every day. He took him on short walks, being careful of his healing paws. He brushed Ranger's fur until it was clean and shiny again. He talked to him constantly, telling him about his day, about the movie he was filming, about anything and everything. And Vin did something else. Every week he and Ranger watched a movie together, usually a Fast and Furious film, just like Ranger used to do with James. The first time Vin turned on one of those movies, Ranger's ears perked up. He recognized the music, the sounds, the voices. He jumped up on the couch and settled in next to Vin, just like he used to do with James. Vin found himself getting emotional during these movie nights. He thought about James watching these same scenes, finding comfort in them. He thought about how his work had helped someone he never met. It gave his career a deeper meaning. As weeks turned into months, Ranger transformed. He gained weight and became healthy again. His paws healed completely. The sadness left his eyes, replaced by something brighter. He learned to play again, to run again, to be happy again. He bonded with Vin's other dogs and became part of the family. But Vin never forgot why Ranger had come into his life. He never forgot James Morrison. He started thinking about other veterans like James, struggling alone with PTSD and other problems. He thought about their service dogs and what would happen to those animals if their owners died or could no longer care for them. Vin decided to do something about it. He used his fame and money to create a foundation. He called it the Ranger Foundation, named after his dog. The foundation had several goals. First, it helped take care of service dogs if their veteran owners passed away. The foundation would find the dogs new homes or care for them until homes could be found. This way, no dog would be left lost and alone like Ranger had been. Second, the foundation helped provide service dogs to veterans who needed them. These dogs were expensive to train, and many veterans could not afford them. The Ranger Foundation covered the costs and connected veterans with dogs who could help them. Third, the foundation provided support for veterans themselves. It offered counseling services, support groups, and resources for dealing with PTSD and other mental health issues. Vin wanted to help people like James before they reached a crisis point. Vin announced the foundation on social media. He shared Ranger's story with Mrs. Patterson's permission. He talked about James Morrison, a veteran who had served his country and struggled afterward. He talked about how James had found hope in movies and his service dog. He talked about how Ranger had walked 15 miles to find him after James died. The response was overwhelming. The story went viral. Millions of people shared it and were touched by it. Thousands of people donated to the Ranger Foundation. Other celebrities joined the cause and helped promote it. Veterans from all over the country reached out, sharing their own stories about how service dogs had helped them. News organizations wanted to interview Vin about Ranger. He agreed to some interviews but was careful not to exploit the story. He always made sure to focus on the real issue. Veterans needed better support, and service dogs were an important part of that support. Vin brought Ranger to film sets with him now. The dog became a familiar sight, always by Vin's side. Ranger had a new job now. He was no longer just a service dog for one person. He became an ambassador, helping people understand the importance of service dogs and veteran care. Children on the film sets loved Ranger. They would pet him gently, and Ranger was always patient and kind with them. Vin used these moments to teach the children about respecting veterans and being kind to service animals. Ranger, in his own way, was still helping people just like he had been trained to do. One day, about a year after Ranger had first followed Vin, Mrs. Patterson called. She said she had something for Vin and wanted to visit. Vin invited her to his home. When she arrived, Ranger immediately recognized her. His tail wagged and he went to her, letting her pet him. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears, seeing how healthy and happy Ranger looked. She had brought a box with her. Inside were things from James's house. There were photos of James and Ranger together, showing them during happier times. There was James's military medal from his service. There were some of James's journals. Mrs. Patterson said she wanted Vin to have these things. They were part of Ranger's history, and Ranger's history was now part of Vin's life. She also brought something else. She had contacted James's estranged brother and told him about Ranger and the foundation. The brother had been deeply moved. He regretted not staying in touch with James. He wished he had been there to help. He could not change the past, but he wanted to support what Vin was doing. The brother had made a large donation to the Ranger Foundation in James's name. Vin was touched. He told Mrs. Patterson that James's legacy was helping countless veterans now. James's story, his struggle, his love for his dog, all of it had created something positive. In a way, James was still helping his fellow veterans even after death. That night, Vin and Ranger had their weekly movie night. As they watched, Vin stroked Ranger's fur and thought about the incredible journey that had brought them together. A veteran struggling with PTSD, a loyal service dog, a series of movies about family and loyalty, a 15-mile journey guided by love and instinct. All these pieces had come together in an impossible, beautiful way. Ranger looked up at Vin and licked his hand. In that moment, Vin felt like Ranger was saying, "Thank you. Thank you for taking him in. Thank you for honoring James's memory. Thank you for giving him a new purpose and a new family." But Vin felt like he was the one who should be grateful. Ranger had taught him that sometimes the most important connections in life happen in unexpected ways. The dog had shown him that loyalty and love could transcend loss and distance. Ranger had given him a deeper understanding of what it meant to serve others, to honor those who struggled, to use his platform for good. People often said that everything happens for a reason. Vin had never been sure about that. But looking at Ranger sleeping peacefully beside him, healthy and safe and loved, he thought maybe it was true. Maybe Ranger was meant to find him. Maybe James's suffering had a purpose, leading to a foundation that would help thousands of veterans. Maybe those movies about family and loyalty had planted seeds that grew into real-life loyalty and real-life family. Ranger had followed Vin for miles because he represented hope to James. Now Vin carried that responsibility every day. He would continue to be worthy of that hope. He would continue to fight for veterans and their service animals. He would continue to tell stories about family and loyalty, knowing now more than ever how much those stories mattered. And every week, he and Ranger would sit together and watch a movie, honoring the man who had loved them both, each in his own way. James Morrison might be gone, but his spirit lived on in his faithful dog and in the lives that dog would help save through the foundation created in his name. That was not just a story. That was legacy. That was love. That was family. Third, the foundation provided support for veterans themselves. It offered counseling services, support groups, and resources for dealing with PTSD and other mental health issues. Vin wanted to help people like James before they reached a crisis point. Vin announced the foundation on social media. He shared Ranger's story with Mrs. Patterson's permission. He talked about James Morrison, a veteran who had served his country and struggled afterward. He talked about how James had found hope in movies and his service dog. He talked about how Ranger had walked 15 miles to find him after James died. The response was overwhelming. The story went viral. Millions of people shared it and were touched by it. Thousands of people donated to the Ranger Foundation. Other celebrities joined the cause and helped promote it. Veterans from all over the country reached out, sharing their own stories about how service dogs had helped them. News organizations wanted to interview Vin about Ranger. He agreed to some interviews but was careful not to exploit the story. He always made sure to focus on the real issue. Veterans needed better support, and service dogs were an important part of that support. Vin brought Ranger to film sets with him now. The dog became a familiar sight, always by Vin's side. Ranger had a new job now. He was no longer just a service dog for one person. He became an ambassador, helping people understand the importance of service dogs and veteran care. Children on the film sets loved Ranger. They would pet him gently, and Ranger was always patient and kind with them. Vin used these moments to teach the children about respecting veterans and being kind to service animals. Ranger, in his own way, was still helping people just like he had been trained to do. One day, about a year after Ranger had first followed Vin, Mrs. Patterson called. She said she had something for Vin and wanted to visit. Vin invited her to his home. When she arrived, Ranger immediately recognized her. His tail wagged and he went to her, letting her pet him. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears, seeing how healthy and happy Ranger looked. She had brought a box with her. Inside were things from James's house. There were photos of James and Ranger together, showing them during happier times. There was James's military medal from his service. There were some of James's journals. Mrs. Patterson said she wanted Vin to have these things. They were part of Ranger's history, and Ranger's history was now part of Vin's life. She also brought something else. She had contacted James's estranged brother and told him about Ranger and the foundation. The brother had been deeply moved. He regretted not staying in touch with James. He wished he had been there to help. He could not change the past, but he wanted to support what Vin was doing. The brother had made a large donation to the Ranger Foundation in James's name. Vin was touched. He told Mrs. Patterson that James's legacy was helping countless veterans now. James's story, his struggle, his love for his dog, all of it had created something positive. In a way, James was still helping his fellow veterans even after death. That night, Vin and Ranger had their weekly movie night. As they watched, Vin stroked Ranger's fur and thought about the incredible journey that had brought them together. A veteran struggling with PTSD, a loyal service dog, a series of movies about family and loyalty, a 15-mile journey guided by love and instinct. All these pieces had come together in an impossible